In this episode, we're going to talk about dice, what the different types of dice are, and what they're used for.
Cool.
So, Dylan, start us off.
So, in a standard dice set, you will have 7 dice. I'm going to go through them all with you now. Just quickly, you have your D20, this one here. This, pretty much everything you do in the game lives and dies off a roll of this dice. Basically, if you want to make a stealth check, you'd roll that. If you want to attack someone, you'd roll that. If you want to do pretty much anything, you're going to roll the D20. The rest of them, we have a D4 here. That is normally used for damage. It looks like a caltrop and would hurt a lot if you stepped on it.
Or a pyramid, or for those that don't know what a caltrop is.
Or a pyramid, thank you. So that's a damage die, but they're also used for a few other things. Basically, your DM will instruct you on which ones to roll when you need to roll them. We then have the D6, which is your standard 6-sided normal dice. Okay, and then we have a D8, which is similar to D4, but it's obviously got double the numbers, and it's that double pyramid sort of look. And then we have the D10. Now, the D10 looks like this, or this, actually. That other one comes in later. It looks like that. They get often confused with the D8 because they look kind of similar. They're both triangular.
So one looks like a spin top, and one looks like a double pyramid.
Yeah. The easiest way to tell is if it has more numbers than 8, it's the D10.
Makes sense.
Yeah. We then have the percentile dice. So it's a D10, but instead of having single digits, it's got tens on it. So it's got 0, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And what will happen is if your DM asks you to roll a D100, you roll both of the D10s that are in your set, and the 10, so that is 71. So that's how it works.
So just run us through. So how did you read a 71 on that, Dylan? Just in case we couldn't see that on the camera.
Sure, sorry. So on the percentile dice, it's got that the 70 there. I don't know if that's showing up. That's your 10, and then on the single digit dice that had a 1, so that's a 71.
Right. So you just put the two numbers together to get your 100.
Exactly
value.
Right. If you roll 3 zeros, that is a 100. If you roll 001, that is a 1.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So because there's no 100 number.
So
on
a 0, and a 1 is not 100. It's actually 1.
1. Yeah. And 000 is 100.
So as long as you remember that the double digit is always your 10 value.
Yeah.
You shouldn't get confused.
You're not going to roll these very often, and your DM can help you when you do. Basically, the next one is the D12. So this is it looks sort of similar to the D20. It's just usually a bit smaller, and really all you use that for is certain spells, but also certain weapons will use the D12. So when talking about dice, as I said, the main one is the big one, the D20. And all the other ones are they'll be for damage rolls or specific things, and you will not use them as much. And you might not even there's every chance you won't use most of them in a game. You'll probably only use the one you use for damage or certain spells.
Great.
Yeah.
Jack, you mentioned earlier off camera about how you set up your dice. Do you want to run through that in terms of making it easy to figure out which dice is which, and just, if you're a bit OCD, having a nice little format on how they're laid out?
For sure. So we've come in here and started saying D20, D4, So it's just D is for die, and then the number represents the number of faces the die has. So I generally just lay mine out with my D20, and then in descending order, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4. When you look at them enough times, you might just know by looking, but some of us, we play for a long time and you still pick up all your dice. Like, which one is the D12? And that's fine. Just setting them up in a way that you remember, even if you write on a piece of paper D20, D4, and then just sit them on top of that. Like Dylan said, you will only use a couple of them most of the time, but it's good to know what's what.
And for certain spells and things like that, it might be roll like 66 or 4d6. So
Stop on
all that means is you get your d6, your normal dice, and you roll them 4 times. That's what it means.
So for those of you that don't have a million sets of dice, just roll the same dice multiple times.
Yep.
Keep track and just add those numbers up. If you've got multiple sets, you can just roll all of them at one hit and then do the math. So it's a good math game.
Yeah.
Another thing to think about with the dice that you may, if you haven't played before, you may have heard the terms before, is a critical roll, or a crit for short, and the other one is a critical fail. So they're affiliated with a 20 being a critical, being the best, and a 1 being the worst as a critical fail. So, Dylan, do you want to explain to us what the difference is between a crit and a critical fail?
Yeah, so on your 20-sided dice, your d20, that some of them will have just a normal number for the 20, like this one. I do not know if you saw that. But then some of them will have like a fun image, like mine. And all it means is if you roll to hit and you roll a 20, one, it's an automatic hit, and it also does a little bit of extra damage as well. It doubles the amount of dice you roll for that attack. You cannot, like, even if you're rolling a d20 for anything else other than hitting with an attack or a spell, you can't crit anything other than an attack. So I can't crit my stealth check. I can't crit my persuasion check.
So it's still good because you get the highest value, but there is no bonus effect of rolling the 20 outside of combat.
Yeah, exactly right. And there might be some things that are really hard to achieve, and even though you roll a 20, if your modifier isn't that high, you might still fail that check. The critical fail. So as I said, when you roll a 20, you always hit. With a critical fail, you automatically miss, and sometimes it'll lead to certain things happening as determined by your DM. Bad things. But in saying that, like, there's no reason to hide it or be upset about it. It's part of the game. If your character, like, I think the failures make your character more interesting and more developed over time. And I don't think there's any reason to not be honest about it or anything like that. It may make combat a little more interesting. Yeah.
So particularly within the role play scenario, the critical fail has a lot more impact there. Sometimes it can be as simple as, like, if you were trying to attack something or you were trying to use something and you rolled a 1, it might backfire on you and you would take the damage or whatever. Or if it's as simple as, like, I'm going to jump over this fence or I'm going to climb this ladder and you rolled a 1, the DM can then be really creative in how could you possibly fail such a simple task. And sometimes that can be really entertaining. You might be like, I'm going to open a door, and you roll a 1 on your strength check or something like that, and the DM then has to come up with this really creative, entertaining way on how you've just failed on opening a door. And I've done it multiple times. I've had combat engagements where my character had 2 pistols and I was shooting at someone point blank and missed 3 times in a row. And the DM had to then, which was Dylan, had to try and figure out how the hell do you miss someone at point blank with a pistol 3 times. And then he sort of came on along the lines of, like, you slipped on something and fell backwards, or you were still disorientated from being attacked in the last round, something like that.
It's just, if anything, it makes the game more interesting. Failures are what build story.
Exactly. Jack, do you want to talk us through a little bit of what I like to call dice etiquette? So the basic concepts of when you roll the dice, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So enthusiasm is great in Dungeons and Dragons, as with many things. But ultimately, whether you're playing on a little surface or a big table, you don't need to throw your dice. So you roll your dice and you get what you get. So if you're rolling dice often and they're, like, going on the floor, or, it rolls off somewhere, and you go, I accidentally dropped it. Just try and be honest with both the people you're playing with and yourself about, were you being silly and you got a bad result and then now you want to redo it, or was it a mistake? So if you accidentally roll a die off the table, that's not the end of the day. Your DM might say, look, rolls off the table don't count. Generally at the start of your campaign, you will decide on these things. So don't hide your rolls, just roll sensibly if you feel that you have it in you, and then everyone can see what you've got. A success is great, but a failure is not the end of the world.
What about what they refer to as a cocked die? So if it lands and maybe it's resting against a book or something and it's sitting on an edge and it's not actually flat on a number, what's the concept there?
I mean, your DM might say, look, roll it again, or if it's a book or something and you can just yank it away and I suppose see what you get.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes it may be predominantly like you can tell it's going towards a number and then just read it. Otherwise the DM may say, yeah, all right, just roll it again. It's just a bit of common sense.